I need someone to tell me the name of the Project Hail Mary fandom because I would like to join it. Hi, I'm Nicole Wilbur. This is where I think out loud about story, and today we are going to go through three different, for lack of better word, beat sheet or story structures for Project Hail Mary. We are looking at Save the Cat, Anatomy of Story, and Hero's Journey. Now, I know that there are, critiques of all of these frameworks. I have a video actually where I'm like, Save the Cat doesn't work. And there's lots of critiques of Hero's Journey as well. Anatomy of Story is just, we love John Truby. I love John Truby. I have zero notes. But we're going to do all three of them to see how they compare and contrast. And because I think they all have something to offer us in terms of how we understand this story. I want us to get really, really nerdy and look at just why this is such a good story. So join me over there. I'm going to flip the camera around and let's get started. Using a virtual background of me in space. Yes, obviously. All right, this is the part of the video where I tell you that if you do not want major, extremely major spoilers for Project Hail Mary, the book and the movie, then turn off this video and go watch it and come back to me later because this is major spoilers and it's really good. So don't spoil yourself. I'll wait. 3, 2, 1, click away. Okay, good. Beautiful. Those of us who are left know, amaze. This movie is awesome. And we are going to decode why it is so awesome by looking at the beat sheets. So over here, just let me orient you to my spreadsheet. I'm hoping you, as my target audience, will be okay with the fact that we are using a very visually boring spreadsheet. I've, tried to reveal dramatically row by row, but come on, we're Andy Weir fans, so this should be fine. Okay. Project Hail Mary is the most unoriginal story ever, right? It's literally, if you've read Christopher Vogler's Hero's Journey, he does like a little mini story that explains the hero's journey where he's like, yes, there is a community that needs something, and a hero is called out among the community, and he goes away on a journey to get the thing they need, which is called an elixir, and then he has ordeals out there, and then he comes back changed. Like that is the story. But this story feels anything but formulaic, and it is super innovative in its structure and in how the story is beautifully told because it does not start in our ordinary world. It uses a dual timeline structure, hence why we have the past and the present shown up here. And we begin in space. We begin with Grace waking up on the spaceship. And this is a brilliant decision because it creates a raw, hooky opening that captures the audience. He wakes up in space. He has no idea where he is. And the character being unsure and confused in an interesting situation brings us in. It immediately delivers on the premise. And this is super important, especially in this day and age. We are not waiting around as audience members to get what we came for. This like instant gratification, all that stuff. We want our premise right away. And Project Hail Mary does that. It also turns the whole story. And actually, I would argue the major dramatic question of the story, although it is, will he save Earth? Yes, but there's another one there, which is, who is Ryland Grace? Or actually, who is this man? Because he doesn't even know his name at first. And, why is he here? How did he end up in space? And that becomes an information plot that we get the answer to at about 75%, but that goes for the duration, the majority of the book. That is a major question. And it means that we are trying to solve the mystery and we're wondering alongside them and our brains are engaged. And that is a beautiful story technique. It also creates a brilliant thematic moment around that 75%, but we will get there shortly. So I originally on this spreadsheet called the present timeline, this as him waking up in the spaceship as the fun and games, but I had a lovely person on my Substack whose name I don't know at the moment. Oh, I should go look. Yes, LB Schulman said she thinks that this is the break into two, and I agree with that. So from a Save the Cat perspective, we actually start at the break into two when Grace Grace wakes up in the extraordinary world. Basically, it's a big plot moment. It's a change of location, and it is that bit when the thing changes. I always think of Break Into Two as a decision. And so that's why I was unsure whether it was Break Into Two or Fun and Games, but I agree it's a big enough kind of turning point, like pivot moment that Break Into Two makes sense. So let's look, oh, not here, we're gonna look here. So that's Save the Cat perspective. Anatomy of Story, I would say this is opponent / mystery. Thank you, John Truby. That's exactly what we're doing. We're opening up with a mystery. And in Hero's Journey, we're starting by crossing the threshold. So if you are enjoying the copy of, yeah, great. Okay. Next, we get into the setup. So we wake up on the spaceship, and then the dual timeline is really well done here because it's very natural, because it's what Ryland Grace is remembering as he continues. So we flash back dual timeline to our setup beat, where Grace is a junior high school teacher teaching his class about the betrothal line. And this is where we are in the ordinary world, and we're learning about the story world. So we're learning about the initial kind of mystery. We still don't really know what's going on. We just know that we just learn about the betrothal line in that setup part. Next, we have some chunks. So our Fun and Games starts with Grace exploring the spaceship and trying to figure out like where he is, why he's there. So this is when he is doing things like testing the gravity and being like, oh my God, I'm in a different solar system. This is when he's doing battle with the robot arm. This is when he's like fiddling around with his different like screens in the control room, and unfortunately discovering his dead friends, and figuring out the fuel, like how much fuel is left over, and his velocity, and all things like that. Back in our other past timeline, we have the catalyst. So I think our catalyst is when Strat approaches Grace. She comes on in and she says, you know, in the book, is it Strat as well? But anyways, they say, we want you to come look at this thing. Very interesting. There's almost a mini hero's journey within the dual timeline, because Grace is originally like, no, you don't want me. I'm just a junior high teacher. So he's kind of getting called to adventure and refusing in there. But it's sort of a miniature version of it, or it's a version of that call refusal within the larger story. So in Anatomy of Story, this is what we would call the inciting incident, Strat approaching Grace, and meeting the mentor and the call to adventure in the hero's journey. So typically in the hero's journey, you'll have a figure who is the herald, and they're the ones who come and call to adventure, Gandalf knocking at the door. And then you also have a mentor, and these can be the same character or they can be different ones. Gandalf is both a mentor and a herald. So is Hagrid, I think, in that area. But then Haymitch, for example, in the Hunger Games is a mentor. Love that he is literally called that. But we'd say the herald is probably like Effie Trinket. So that's our catalyst, the thing that starts the story. Now you think about this, right? If we had started with the setup of him in the classroom and then had this catalyst, it would have been a more traditional structure, but it would have taken us so long to get to all of this good space stuff. And going into back here, and the space stuff, the science, the measuring, the figuring it out. What did my friend call it? She called it problem solving porn, or like intellectual porn, because it's for anybody who is so curious about the getting into challenges and solving problems and the math he's doing and how intelligent he is. That's a huge part of the book and the movie, is watching Grace figure all this stuff out, same as it was with The Martian. So yes, that the structure allows Andy Weir to really accomplish and to have time to do all of these things because we're already hooked. So then we get back into space. This is where Grace meets Rocky. In Save the Cat language, I would call this the B story, because they meets Rocky. So our A story is the whole save Earth, and then our B story is the buddy romance. In Anatomy of Story terms, this would be our ally moment. And then in Hero's Journey, this is part of the test allies and enemies beat. We'll have that for a little bit. I would say our midpoint is when Grace and Rocky start working together. It's probably around the time that they're, able to fully communicate with each other. Probably around the time that Rocky comes over into Grace's ship, I would say is like precisely the midpoint when they're very clear on this is our new goal. Now, Save the Cat often calls this midpoint an apparent defeat or apparent victory. I have a video on why Save the Cat, is not the best framework to use. And in that, I talk about how midpoints often are not an apparent defeat or an apparent victory, especially not of the global story. So when Rocky and Grace start working together, they're able to communicate now. They move in together. So cute. That's not really an apparent victory. I mean, it is a victory. It's a great step forward, but it's a change in circumstance. I have it here as a revelation. The revelation is kind of drawn out, but it's, hey, we have alien life and I can communicate with this alien life and I figure out how to talk to them. So we get a lot of information that kind of builds to this point. And the midpoint, the midpoint scene is, we definitely have a plan being filmed here. So there's numerous revelations and I think numerous decisions on Grace's part. I might even say that we would maybe move this up here, the second revelation and decision being more when he meets Rocky, because the big reveal is alien life and then deciding to work with Rocky. And then we have the plan. They're figuring out, all of the fun. How do we collect the astrophage sample and figure out why it's not spreading, etc. All right. So then back on land, we have our debate step in Save the Cat realm. This is not quite what I would call a debate, though, because Grace, in that sort of mini story of this dual timeline, is in it, right? He's not like, should I help them? Should I not? There's a little bit of that, obviously, at the beginning. But then by the time he is on the team and people are calling him Strat's second, and he's, at least in the book, going around to all these different countries and recruiting experts. And, in the movie, he's brought onto the aircraft carrier and all that stuff. Like he is in it. He is on the team. So this is him learning about the mission to the other sun, to Alpha Centauri, is that it? Or Tau Ceti. He's meeting and starting to train the flight crew, so the astronauts are hired, all of that. This is first revelation and decision. So his first revelation is at the beginning of this sequence when he says, all right, I will help you. I think really, if we get more granular with this, it's the moment when they figure out that the astrophage is in fact made of water, and they say bye-bye, Grace, but then he comes back and he wants to continue working on it. That would be that revelation and decision. This is such a good story because there's a continuous reveal sequence, right? Throughout this entire section, there's reveals of we're gonna go to the sun, we need to do X, we need to do Y. And he continues to decide to help and to contribute and to stick with the project. And his motive is really around, saving his students and helping to save the world. And he's part of this team. From the present timeline, we have what Save the Cat would call the bad guys close in. Although, again, terrible name. The name doesn't really fit for the section we're in here. It's after the midpoint. I think the anatomy of story term drive, as in we're working towards our goal with an increased sort of frenzy, is a much better definition. They're working to figure out how to get the astrophage. They do their first sample. They realize that there's life on the other planet, and the life is probably eating the astrophage. They have to go find the organism, all that stuff. In Hero's Journey, this would be our kind of approach towards the innermost cave. And I guess that's kind of the bad guys closing in. I suppose Grace is remembering more and more about the project, but that's not really bad guys closing in at all. They are closing in on the difficult mission they're going to have to do. So it works in that sense, but I really just prefer the anatomy of story term drive here. Next, we have our next stage in the debate. So back in the past timeline, we see the scientists on the crew die, and Strat asks Grace to join the mission. So I have this still as debate from a Save the Cat perspective, and I think that one holds even a little bit stronger. We could look at this as kind of the attack by ally, because Strat is asking Grace to join, and he's saying no, and we have sort of a call to adventure here. And all of that brings us to the moment when everything comes together. And that is our All Is Lost and our break into two. So what I think is so genius about this story, remember this video is called The Genius of Hail Mary, is that we bring these two beats together. So because of the question we started at the beginning, which was who is Ryland Grace and how did he get into space? We learned that answer at the All Is Lost moment. So just around the time Grace is very much injured, taking the lower microbe sample on the planet, he remembers how he ended up on the ship. And this whole time he's been comforting himself with like, well, you know, I must have known it was a suicide mission when I volunteered. I must have decided X, like I must have been a real hero, blah, blah, blah. And he kind of has this confidence in himself that's comforting himself with it. He discovers that is not at all what happened. And it juxtaposes so many beats together. So we have All Is Lost and break into two. We also have the battle and apparent defeat, because this is when Grace is very, very hurt taking that microbe sample, and the spaceship spinning, you know the scene. At the same time, though, we get the weakness, need, and the self-revelation all at once, because the self-revelation, this is so beautiful. The self-revelation is his realization of the weakness and need of the person he was on Earth. Isn't that cool? It's so cool. And then, yeah, we get refusal of the call and the ordeal, hero's journey at the same time. This structure is so genius. So first of all, if the story was purely linear, the forced crossing the threshold would not have worked. Characters need to have agency. They need to make decisions. So if we'd gone through the whole rigmarole and then he'd just been like kidnapped and forced onto a spaceship, yeah, okay, the story could have been like, I think we agree, Andy Weir is a good enough writer, and this is a beautiful enough little buddy love story that it still could have been good without this like kind of dual timeline structure. But it's a lot harder to work with a character who doesn't want to be somewhere than it is to work with a character who does and who is motivated to solve their problems. Also, it would have like gotten rid of all the tension. Anyways, if this refusal was in Act 1 as well, we might not have liked Grace. Instead, we feel the self-revelation with him. Like, we are heartbroken for him. We're not like, oh, bad person. You know what I mean? It also allowed us more time in the lab. Save the Cat writes the novel might call this like a double bump. So the story started, he's called to adventure when he joins the lab, and then he's called to adventure again. See, I called to adventure too at this point. And so we kind of have the story start, and the second call is the to join the space crew, which he resists generally. If we started in the ordinary world, even this double bump technique would have required kind of condensing that lab part and all the Earth part down, because we have to get into space. And I haven't done the exact kind of percentages on how much of the movie is on Earth versus in space. And I haven't done it for the book either, but I guarantee if it was in a normal structure, we would not have had as much time to play around in the lab and poke microbes with a stick. We just wouldn't have, because the audience would have lost interest. So let's continue on past the All Is Lost and break into two. By the way, if I'm looking over here, at times I'm referring to my Substack article, which is my most popular article on Substack ever. I'm very proud of it. It's a fun read. It goes into a little bit more depth on a couple of different things that I'm talking about here. So if you're interested in that, you can check out the Substack article for this one below. So as part of All Is Lost kind of in here, Rocky breaks out of his atmosphere bubble to save Grace. I love that moment. And Grace isn't sure that Rocky will survive. Oh, yes. So also in the Substack article, I go more into talking about the moral argument. And this is an important part of it, but I don't want to chat about that here because I wanted to focus more on our beat sheets. So check out the Substack article kind of for that. But this is the anatomy of story beat that's like Gate, Gauntlet, Visit to Death. First, it looks like Grace is almost going to die, and then Rocky almost dies, and there we go. So our Dark Night of the Soul, I don't know, maybe this should be up here. Dark Night of the Soul is not my favorite beat. But we have a kind of reversal or a turning point inflection in the story. And the turning point inflection in the story is when Rocky finally wakes up. And first calling this the Dark Night of the Soul, maybe this really should go up here, this is the reward from a hero's journey perspective. So we've gone through this terrible ordeal, and the reward is Rocky does wake up. Next, we get into our break into 3, and that is also what the road back would be in the hero's journey. This is Grace and Rocky. They have their microorganisms to eat the astrophage. They divide it up. They're in their respective ships, and they part ways to go to their home planets. And then we have our finale sequence, which this is where Anatomy of Story really becomes great, because we have the third big revelation, which is when Grace realizes that the organism eats through xenonite and that Rocky is about to die a slow, painful death alone. I think because of radiation. I can't remember the exact things, but he realizes this. And that is when we get the most beautiful payoff moment right here, which he puts the organism in John, Paul, George, and Ringo, along with his tape to send back to Earth, and he goes after Rocky. And that is his moral decision. And it's so beautiful because, of course, at the all is lost break into 2 moment up here, he refused to risk his life. He did not want to give up his life on Earth to save humanity. He said, no, absolutely not. He did not want to go on a unalived mission. I don't know. Anyways, he did not want to go on the mission. And in this one, he is willingly giving his life up on Earth to go save one extraterrestrial. And it's so good. Literally at this moment, I saw this movie with my mom, and afterwards she said, if he hadn't gone back to save Rocky, I would have walked out of the theater. And that's how you know a story is so good, when it can pull that kind of emotional response out of someone. Okay, and then we have Rocky, or Grace reaches Rocky, and they have the moment where they're like, this is so cute. And that's the hero's journey kind of resurrection point. And finally, we get to the final image. So Grace saves Rocky, and then Grace is living on Arid with Rocky and Adrian, and we're at new equilibrium. From a hero's journey perspective, you could call that the return with the elixir. Although, again, he doesn't actually return, but somebody does. So there you go. It's an interesting one, because up here, when he's making this like revelation and decision, there's almost another layer of like sadness to it, because we think like, oh, he's learned all this stuff in space, like he's this incredible person now. And we just know that if he went back to Earth, his life would probably be a lot better. He would have maybe stronger connections with Strat. He would be a hero. He would be highly respected, and he have this total different perspective on life. And so when he decides not to go back to Earth and he gives it all up for Rocky, which obviously we needed him to do that. That was when we heard that he was, it was so terrible. But anyways, when we heard about all that, there is this added layer of sacrifice to it, because we know he's sacrificing the chance to see these people again. In the movie, they do say like, you might go back to Earth. But then in the book, he's just on Arid. And it's really beautiful. So if you think about this from a kind of like parallelism, mirror image perspective, at the end, we have, or at the very beginning, Grace is a junior high teacher. At the very end, he is teaching folks on Arid. The next step is, he wakes up in space. This is him leaving space. And then kind of this step in here, he decides not to save humanity, not to risk himself to save humanity. And in here, he decides to risk his life to save one person. So it's a beautiful kind of mirror structure there, kind of getting into the fractal design and such. So if you liked this video, give it a big thumbs up. Check out that Substack if you want to dive in even deeper. Tell me what you think below. Amaze. Also, what is the name of the fandom? If you could let me know, that would really appreciate it. I would like to join. I'm obsessed. Like, I love this book so much. Like, I think it's the book and the movie, but the movie, because I saw it first, I don't know if I felt so much like emotion and just pure delight and investment in a movie in quite a long time. So I would love to hear your experience about it and your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Nicole Wilbur, and I will see you next time with a story writing vlog.